My name is Neysha Arcelay, and I have the honor of being here moderating this wonderful panel. I have to say thank you to Ian because he gave the most fantastic segue to the discussion that we are going to be having today. So today with me, I'm having Mike Speer and also Rajiv Kulkarni, and I am not going to be able to do justice, so I'm going to let them introduce yourself. How about Rajiv? You go first.
So I think I know a lot of you folks in the room from the old Summa days, so don't hold it against me. But yeah, my name is Rajiv Kulkarni. I work for PNC last 4 so odd years. I run a lot of different things, jack of all trades, I guess, but all Salesforce related, of course. And I was excited when these guys asked me to come and talk. I didn't think there was a chance in hell that PNC would actually let me do it, because they usually reject everything. But for some reason, I don't know what you guys did, you greased some wheels, and so I was able to pull this off. So I'm excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Rajiv. We also have Mike Speer. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, Neysha. Hi, everybody, Mike Speer. I've recognized a lot of faces in the room. I'm currently a business strategy director with Salesforce, which isn't a very clear title, but so I lead all the service work for state and local government projects that we have. I've been working with Salesforce in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2010, worked in Giant Eagle, born and raised here, so been around and happy to talk to everybody.
Wonderful. So actually that leads perfectly to the first question that I have for you guys. Transformation is the bread and butter of everything that you do in your day-to-day basis. Could you talk a little bit about the major changes that you have seen in transformational initiatives pre-COVID and post-COVID?
Yeah, so I mean, I think all of you have experienced the fun year of 2020 and what that brought to us as far as how we had to reimagine and rethink how we worked, not only with our day-to-day stuff, with our families, with the people in our communities, all of that, right? So all of that played into it. And so pre-COVID, us getting together like this was no big deal, right? Us saying, hey, let's have a meeting, let's hang out, let's go talk, let's go whiteboard something was not a huge deal. And then when 2020 hit and there was a lot of confusion and people didn't really know what was going on, we had to really rethink how we were going to operate. I have a pretty big team, and so thinking through, well, PNC itself, right? It's a large organization. You guys see all the buildings around, and they're all empty now, right? Most of them are empty, and there's different ways now of how we need to use all this stuff. And so how are we going to continue to transform, right? We'd started this Salesforce project 5-6 years ago, and amazingly, ironically, we're still going, right? Isn't that weird? But there's always something that's going to happen when it comes to these kinds of projects. And so this was just another bump in the road, but it was a huge bump in the road, right? So how are we going to continue the transformation that we had started? We're talking about 50,000 users of Salesforce. How are we going to get and ensure that what we were putting in front of them was actually what they wanted? And so we had to think through all of those things. How are we going to operate with each other, let alone our business users? And then, not forget about, but we hadn't even really thought about what the customer experience was going to be. We're just thinking internally how we were going to do all this stuff. So this transformation project wasn't put on hold. We didn't stop what we were doing. We just had to rethink as to how we were going to work with each other. And, I think we're still learning, right? I think now, as things have changed back to whatever the normal is, right? It's really not normal, right? Because I still only go to the office once a week, and I don't really even have to go to the office. Even then, like, we've shown that we can operate in this new environment and actually thrive in that environment. And that kind of hurts us a little bit too, because now it's like, well, you can do more work. You can actually, yes. I don't have that commute anymore, right? So that part of that transformation has changed. But does that mean that I need to start working at 8 o'clock in the morning, or have a 7 o'clock meeting, or have a 7 p.m. meeting? No. I try to tell the people I work with, the people who work for me, that I want things to go back to the way they were. I want you to spend time with your families. That's part of this transformation as well. And so no meetings before 9, no meetings after 4 o'clock, no meetings during lunch. Like, that's crazy. People are like yelling at me because I've told people that that's what I want them to do. And I think it's important that we continue to do that and push that way. And that's part of what our transformation is. The Salesforce stuff will happen, right? We have smart people. You guys are all smart people. You'll figure out all of those things. I think it's more important how we interact with the people that are on our teams and our business users. That's what's going to get us further and make that transformation easier to go through.
And Rajiv, I really want to talk a little bit later about best practices, because I think you touched on very important points. We often forget the wellness part of the transformation. But Mike, how about from your perspective, what have you seen in terms of change and transformation pre-COVID, post-COVID? What has caught your eye?
Well, I don't want to limit it to pre-COVID versus post-COVID. I think it's during COVID. Things changed. Because when it first started, you had to schedule time to talk to anybody because no one had free time because they were always in meetings. And I think it's evolved and we've changed past that. But I want to touch on something Rajiv said about setting your boundaries, taking care of yourself. Like, you have to, I think the biggest change is you have to be deliberately human with everyone you're working with. And putting those boundaries in place and going out of your way to meet people and communicate with them at their level, at their comfort level, to keep them engaged. And without doing that, everyone had their cameras on for the first 6 months or a year, whatever it was. Now no one has cameras on because they're sick of it and they don't want to get dressed up. And I'm in my sweatpants every day with a t-shirt, so I don't mind. But giving people the freedoms that they need to feel comfortable while communicating, while engaging with them. Some people want to be on camera, some people don't. Some people want to send you an instant message, some people are email. Finding what works with everybody else is the key. And I think we've been doing that from a technology perspective. You think of the business users you've worked with. Well, some people need visuals to learn and understand what you're talking about. Some people need to hear you orally say it. It's the same thing with your team and your communications. As long as you find that way to connect with people, then I think you're going to make progress.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I want to touch on that aspect of driving the change, communication, engagement. What best practices have you guys come across when you are doing an implementation as it relates to engaging people now that everyone is in different locations? Specifically, Rajiv, in your case, you're driving a transformation. Mike too, in several clients. So what best practices have you found that have been successful when engaging change now that everyone is in different locations?
So I was saying earlier how I don't want to have meetings too early. Part of it is just selfish, right? Because I'm also a part-time Uber driver for my kids, and so I need to be in other places, and I need to be, during those times. And so I know that those same people have to do those same things. So a lot of, and also, it's not like the meetings go away. We have plenty of meetings. We're constantly with each other. We're constantly talking to each other and doing all those things. So what I've done is all of my check-ins with whoever it is I try to check in with, and I have some people here who know this because I work with them, is that I rarely talk about work with them during our check-ins. If they want to talk about work, fine, that's great. But I'd much rather understand what's going on in their lives and what kinds of things they're dealing with and what kinds of things I can help them with. And I think that's really helping because they now have a time and space where they don't have to talk about the Apex class blowing up in their face or whatever the hell is going on with Salesforce, because it's always going to be there. It will be there today. It's going to be there tomorrow. But, their kids, all these different things that they're dealing with because of the transformations that are happening in their own lives, that to me is more important. And so I spend more time doing that with them and understanding what's going on in their lives for that. And that goes for not just PNC employees, it's everybody I work with, whether they're contractors or not. So that's you hike too, folks, if you ever show up at PNC. I'll do the same thing with you guys too. So I think those are really important. It's just that human interaction that really helps close the gap. And I learned that, I think, just through my career. And like you were saying, it's not just about pre and post COVID. It's those kinds of things that it's going to continue now, because this is the new norm that we're living in, whether we're wearing masks or not, or whatever the next thing that's going to come and bite us in the butt next time. I think it will all come into play in the same manner.
Also, how about you, Mike? Specifically in your case, you're dealing with different environments and different clients. What best practices have you seen in terms of engaging with the teams?
Well, Rajiv stole my answer. It's connecting with people. Yeah. It's the same thing. You have to talk about families first. The one thing that I've noticed, especially over COVID, things have slowed down a little bit, and there's always tomorrow. There's always the next day. And sometimes you don't need your one-on-one. You don't need to provide a project update. You sit down and talk to someone for half an hour, and it's as good as going for a walk or just BSing about whatever you have in common. Like, you need that communication and being deliberate about putting that first. You draw people in. And it's thinking back to what we did beforehand. I remember working with Becky Willis at John Eagle and going to our customer call center and talking about how hard it is for the call center agents to return or refund a gift card. Because the policy was you weren't allowed to do it, but they still did it because they cared and they wanted to get you what you wanted. The best way to solve it was to go and sit with people and sit next to them closer than we were, because there wasn't that much space for the call center, and watch what they're doing, take notes, and you listen to them and you start talking. You build that relationship partially because the physical closeness you have, but knowing what they're doing and caring about what they're doing and trying to help what they do, then you open up. And you start learning about their kids or their backache or whatever it is. They're complaining about their boss, but don't tell them because you're working with their boss too. So you build that trust from those little interactions that you have to keep repeating over and over again.
That definitely is wonderful. Like Ian shared before, we still need that human interaction. So I'm happy to hear that hasn't changed much. I wanted to switch gears a little bit on the technical aspect of implementation, specifically change management. Have you experienced any particular challenge as it relates to driving change and adoption during a transformation now that everyone is in different locations? Anything that you would like to share?
Honestly, I don't think it's changed that much. The part that changes how you pull people in, everyone being remotely, it's more difficult. You can't just find someone at their desk and tap them on the shoulder and talk to them and say, hey, we need you. You either have to, again, go back to their level and their familiar level of conversation. Is it a Slack message? Is it an email? Do you have to have the phone call? Do they want a video chat? Finding how they want to communicate and open up with them. But that was a problem beforehand anyway. It still exists. It just, you have less of that physical proximity to go and pull people in. I think that's the only change that's probably hindered us a little bit.
Okay.
But then people I think they're a little more apt to open up because of that. They know you can't do that, so they'll answer the phone or they'll start the relationship a little bit differently.
How about you, Rajiv? Have you noticed anything different as it relates to adoption?
I don't want to say that people are more honest right now, because I think people have always been honest. I think what's happening now is that people realize that they can't have that tap on the shoulder, let's go in the room and talk, or whiteboard this session as easily as they used to. So now when they're on the phone with you, they're probably saying things and maybe getting to the point a little bit more so. Just not that they don't want to waste people's time, because we still want to have that conversation, but I think what's happening is that people are saying, instead of like glossing things over or trying to shine it up and say we're actually going to be okay, they're actually okay saying this is going to suck, or we're in trouble, or whatever it might be. And I think that's happening a lot easier now than it did maybe before. Whereas I might get a PowerPoint deck or a 15-page email that I'm trying to go through and figure out, what's actually going on here. I think now people are cutting to it a little bit faster, and I think that helps us with things like at PNC. Just as a large bureaucratic, I was telling somebody, it's like we're always trying to steer the Titanic, right? It's just so slow and everything's taking forever. And now we're trying to say, okay, let's just get through that. Let's not we may still hit the iceberg, but at least we'll do it faster, I guess. And and I think that's probably where I think we've seen a little bit better when it comes to this transformation. Because I'd much rather know now what the problems are going to be than trying to dig through something and some huge presentation that I have to figure it out myself.
Well, I want to jump on that point because I've been consulting for 8 years, I think, and that's one of the things that I've always tried to teach new people coming on, that don't sugarcoat it. There's a way to deliver it with tact, but bring it up early. As soon as you see an issue, talk about it. You have more lead time to get in front of it, more people to pull in. I think the other side actually now is it's easier to collaborate, and people are more willing to put help in and talk through problems than they were before. Before it was kind of your problem, go deal with it, pull in your trusted people, but now, and I don't know if this is just being at Salesforce with additional resources or just a shift in mentality around project work, but okay, this person knows about this or this person knows about that. Let's pull them in and they've experienced it, so let's learn from our collective experiences to get over the hump that we need.
Actually, I want to tap into that point for my next question. You talk about, both of you talk about being more direct and being able to just share earlier in the process whenever there's a problem. When we are implementing something, especially big projects, there's always your advocates, your skeptical people, middle ground, and your complete detractors. How before COVID, you could pull everyone into a room, have an all-hands meeting, and try to sell again the case. How do you deal with the detractors during a change in these days?
I think it's talking it out.
Okay.
I think it varies by situation and level of the detractor. Because if it's a C-suite detractor, that's a separate conversation that they may have insight or they may be able to just kill something. But if you're working within your own team or business people, let's put the reasons on the table. One thing I learned a long time ago was digging in with 5 whys and kind of getting to the root cause of why do you think it's going to be an issue or what's your experience. And the more you talk through, the more you get someone talking, the more chance you have to collaborate, the better understanding you'll have of their experience and their perspective. One thing that my father said to my mother a while ago was he was in the hospital and he was telling her he wasn't feeling well. And as soon as he stopped talking, she started chirping and saying something else. And he goes, "Why don't you just shut up? You're just waiting for me to stop talking so you can say something and not hearing what I have to say." And changing that perspective and actually listening to people and keeping your opinions to yourself so you can understand their perspective is better. And you build collaboration that way and you build trust that way.
How about you, Rajiv?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Mike just said. I don't know about the not waiting for your wife to chirp in, but I think I think when you have right people around you and you have those detractors, it depends, like you said, it's like what kind of level they are, right? Because you can have the conversation with them, and I don't think anything's changed, whether this was before COVID, during, or post. I think it's still the same. But you also have, if you can escalate things or whatever, like those kinds of things, those things still need to happen. So I don't think anything's really changed much that way. I think it's that you still have that direct conversation, because I can go and have that conversation and say, hey, I don't know why you're not on board. Like, just tell me why you're not on board. Yeah. And maybe it's easier now to do that than it was before, because you could hide in the corner of a room and not participate. And whereas now I can just call you and say, get on camera. I don't care if you don't want to be on the camera, but let's just talk through it. So I think and I'm lucky. I have a boss he's a hammer. I always call him a hammer, and he's always looking for nails to hit. So I'm always happy to point out the nails to him. So see, if you have that, you can take advantage of it. I don't want to do that, but yeah. I think we have that ability.
I personally, my experience driving change, this is something that I'm hoping is not only my experience. I think it's clearer because now people cannot hide behind the water cooler conversations. Now is, I can totally access you by any of the collaboration tools. If I can sense or you have been vocal that you are against the particular change. Before it was easier to hide, like Rajiv, you were saying, because everyone was on site and everyone was having sideline conversations. So I think it's easier to demystify the complexities and the miscommunications of change because of everything that we have at our fingertips. And talking about fingertips and collaboration tools, gosh, the collaboration tools have evolved tremendously over the past almost 2 to 3 years. Based on everything that we have available in our fingertips, what have you guys found is the most effective from everything that we have? Video calls, phone calls, chats. What's most effective for you?
I think the biggest advance I used to work at home probably 6 or 7 years ago, and my experience then versus pandemic and now was video chat. I think that's made me feel the most comfortable. It's made me be able to engage people better. Other than that, I'm going through kind of a self-evaluation of how I want to work and how I think teams should work. And doing more asynchronous communication whenever possible, because we've had this influx of meetings like 9 to 5 nonstop. You're 5 minutes late because you have to go to the bathroom at lunchtime and you can't get out. You have to eat a protein bar and a Diet Coke instead of actually having a meal or taking a walk. But trying to push those meetings or those discussions asynchronously, personally, I've only started using Slack since I've been at Salesforce, and I love it. So I'm trying to figure out how to build automation, how to have those conversations. One thing that I personally hate is a daily stand-up, and it just drives me nuts. And I'm trying to think of how we can do that in Slack. And I'm working with one of my clients now. There's a half an hour stand-up every morning, and there's 30 people on it. We talk about 4 things because we get into the weeds. So how do everyone put their update in? How do we have those threaded conversations and follow up when necessary with the right people instead of wasting a collective 12 hours of time in the 30-minute span because we're following these practices that aren't needed anymore. So I think trying to using the video chat when possible to keep the engagement, but you also get engagement by having asynchronous communication and pushing people to do that so they can focus and do what they need to do and what they want to do instead of sitting there and kind of half listening and hoping you don't call on them.
Thank you for that. How about you, Rajiv?
So other than us upgrading from, what was before Teams? What was it, Microsoft? Skype, yeah, that piece of crap. Other than upgrading from that, we haven't really done anything different, right? Now, not by these guys, not trying to sell Slack to us. But, so we're still collaborating, right? I mean, we're still doing, I think, a lot of the same things. I think we're just finally taking advantage of those tools. I think before it was just kind of like, it was just there. I would see a bunch of messages in chat, and I'd be like, I should probably check that out. Now it's like that's where we live. We see those things. It's constant. It's on my phone, which is annoying. But like it's those kinds of things now are just part of the norm. Whereas I think we just didn't take advantage of it. But to your point, how do we now take better advantage of those things? I think we're still thinking through those things. Can we integrate stuff with Salesforce directly? I think we're trying to think outside the box on some of these things. But I'm not a business user. I'm not a user of Salesforce. But we're trying to figure out all those things. So I think trying to just take advantage of what's already there in front of us is all we're doing right now.
Awesome. When thinking about change, we have our detractors, we have our adopters, early adopters on the middle ground, but we also have the exact same thing as it relates to the stakeholders. how do you drive stakeholder engagement when everyone is on so many different locations and probably in different pages about how the change impact them? I'm going to start this time with you, Rajiv.
So we're implementing a COE right now, our Salesforce COE, and part of our job and responsibility is to engage those stakeholders on a regular basis. So the earlier session on process improvement, like that is like, I feel like sometimes that's like a taboo word for us, because there's a lot of this just like parity. I just want to do what I do now and I want to put it in the new system. And I think he even said it, it's like we're efficiently bad, basically, is what ends up happening, right? And so I think that's where we have engaged the stakeholders in showing them that we can actually improve their process, make their lives better, remove junk from their process, remove steps, right? Get rid of those things that make them inefficient. So I think we're showcasing that to them and getting them to buy into it. So what's happening now, like, and Heather's here, she's from PNC, she's running our CRMA product and building this out. And what's happening is we're showing this to people, and they're freaking out because they want it now. And we're in that spot now where we're saying, hey, stakeholder, this is how we can improve your life. But now we have to say, get in line, and that's a good thing. And I think that's how we're helping the stakeholders. Whereas before, they were just like, here's my procedure manual, just copy this into Salesforce for us. And now they realize that, actually, here's our procedure manual, let's rip this thing up, and let's rethink how we use Salesforce. Now, we're starting to get people to buy into that. It's taken 6 years, and maybe in 6 years we'll actually implement it, but at least we're going in the right direction. And I think that's the most important thing, is that these stakeholders are starting to see the value. And it could be any product, right? I'm not just talking about Salesforce. It could be anything that we do. It's showcasing them that the process can improve first, and then whatever system it is, we can figure out which system does that. And I think that's the message that we're sending to our stakeholders now.
Has that changed from where everyone was 100% on site and having everyone now in different locations, engaging the stakeholder and getting their buy-in and support?
Yeah, because I think before they could dictate to us what it is they wanted. And I think now we can go to them and say, is that really what you want? Like, we can spend the time having that conversation, whereas before it just felt like we're all in a room and we're just like, just get this done. Just make a checklist of things and run through it. Now that doesn't have to be the case. Now we can actually be thoughtful behind what it is we're trying to improve and how we can get better at those things. And so I think the fact that we're all over the place is I think maybe a helpful thing in that case.
Awesome. How about you, Mike?
I think those types of situations that you're describing, when they want parity between the old system and the new system, I think those are the toughest engagements and transformation projects you have to go through. I'm thinking of course, those are the easiest ones for me to rattle off because they've given me the most PTSD from any project work. But I think the aspect is when they're driven by IT because it's old technology that is no longer supported and it has to move with a certain time frame. Those are the absolute worst, because it's IT driven, the business doesn't want to change, it's something that has to be done to keep the business running, and most people don't want anything to do with it. They just want to keep working the way they want to work. So you're limited in the aspect of diving into the business and finding what the processes are, how you need to work with people, how they want to work versus how they work now. And like you said, they're efficiently bad because they do things that they have to do because of system limitations. And I think the business users that we work with have some PTSD from old projects. Because I remember working with a customer downtown a couple years ago, and they weren't used to Salesforce. They were used to a 5-year Oracle implementation. And we built something out for them in 3 months, and they lost their minds because it was so fast. And we iterated 3 or 4 times over the next month with new releases to push things out. And they were doing all their financial planning for their manufacturing products in Excel. And I was blown away when the project started, and I couldn't believe one of the oldest companies in the city was doing that all in Excel after 100 years of being in business. And it's just crazy that no matter how many different companies that I've worked with as a consultant, there's always something that blows you away from a technology perspective. I'm working with another customer that they're using an ASP application or an Access database to manage train repairs and take notes. Like, it's astounding. But once you go in and learn their process and just see what they do, then you can be innovative and drive the change. They simplify the business process. You show them how easy it is, and then they buy in, and then they can't get enough. And you got to get that first little hit of the technology upgrades to really drive the change.
Have you seen any difference showing them the art of the possible, like you just described before? Now everyone virtual.
Salesforce isn't allowed to say art of the possible. That's all they ever say.
I don't like that word because it's a double-edged sword. Because, like Rajiv, like you said, people want change when they see those things, and they want it now. Yeah. And the one thing that I recently talked about was I did work with Boston Nova Robotics and their Walmart robots and IoT and field service and all kinds of stuff. It was a pretty cool project. But once you start showing those examples of, hey, this is how that process worked. A robot scans a shelf in Walmart, it goes into Salesforce, your tech knows about it, they remote in, they fix things. Once you show them that process, when can we do that? Can we do that next month? Everyone wants to see those really cool changes as fast as you can, and they don't realize the baby steps, how long the entire project took, the baby steps along the way to get there, and the total effort that goes into it. And it's not one big change, it's lots of incremental changes to make the progress to get to the point where a robot's talking to a field tech, but the message is going from the store into Pittsburgh, over to warehouse, Salesforce servers, on their phone. It's a huge travel time, but you have to build all those pieces along the way and not knowing that full impact. So every time I talk about art of the possible or try to I don't try to blow people away with technology, because I'm going to regret it later because of the demand they're going to give us. But if we can show them those little things, let's talk about day one, what do you want to do? And then we can quickly increment and improve as we go through. I think that's where the key is.
No, that's definitely very important. But now you have shown them what is possible. Now you broke it for the following projects. So, especially later in the year, in 2020, there was a lot of messaging and articles about having meeting fatigue and Zoom fatigue. How do you maintain your respective teams engaged now that pretty much video conferencing is the way to go? I think we talked a little bit about having the space to talk about, Rajiv, you share about the personal aspects, but what other things you implement within your teams to maintain them engaged?
I think Rajiv said it best earlier. Like, you need those boundaries. You need your team boundaries. You need your personal boundaries. You've got to realize people need to take care of stuff. Like, people went to the dentist before and it wasn't a big deal. People left work early to go pick up their kid from the school because they were sick. It's a little bit easier to manage now because we're at home. You're out quicker. You're still taking phone calls in the car. You're still answering Slack messages while you're waiting in the parking lot for the dentist or the doctor, whatever it is. But having like your team SOPs in place. How do we want to operate? How do we want to collaborate? Like, what's our working agreement to be efficient and kind to one another? And then go from there. One thing that I've tried with my teams is I tend to buck the system, and last time I had an in-house team of my own, we did summer Fridays even though it wasn't an HR policy. And I talked to my boss about it and said, keep it quiet, do what you guys need to do, take the afternoon off on Friday. If someone needs to take the day, give them a day. If they're working a lot, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, be human about it. Give them a day off if they worked overnight to fix a problem. One of the things about being in technology that the whole mantra about work, let people work whenever they want, wherever they want, as long as they get the work done, generally that works, but in technology it doesn't all the time because of the production needs, the nature of the work we do. So sometimes you got to give people a 3 or 4 day work weekend because they've been busting their hump for 3 or 4 days with a new release, a new project coming out. But you find the balance, and there's always going to be a give and take, and as long as you understand what people are putting in and giving back to them so they can recharge and they don't become resentful of what they're doing or what you're doing.
That's very important, the human aspect and the less of hourly focus, like sometimes technology projects have. How about you, Rajiv? Any other thing that you would like to share about team engagement?
I mean, I think, to quote Mike, I said it earlier better, I think. I don't think I could quote myself again, but I think, I mean, there's other things that we've tried to do, like virtual happy hours and things like that. Like, I mean, you don't have to drink or anything, but even if it's just that 15, 20 minutes where the whole team gets together and actually can talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. I think it's one of the things that Salesforce actually did really well when we were all in our houses. They tried to do these happy hour things with us, and I think that kind of stuck for a lot of us. And it's just a nice way for the teams to just unwind. Two truths and a lie, like, just have fun with the folks that are on your teams, and you start to learn more about them, and then the work becomes easier, I think, for everybody.
Oh, that's fantastic. I might steal some of those ideas. How about each of you personally? Rajiv, you did talk about boundaries. With technology in our fingertips, it's very tempting to succumb to the dings of the phone and the alerts. You talk about your personal boundaries of no meetings after 4, etc. How do you keep your sense of sanity with that temptation of having access to all of these tools in your phone?
So I'm learning more through my kids, I think, and see how addicted they are to their devices and how I'm trying to get them to stop doing that. It's hard, but I'm learning more about that too, because there's no doubt that I don't have a problem scrolling through TikTok and all that stuff and Netflix and all the things that are right at your fingertips. But if I stop the meetings at 4 o'clock, that doesn't necessarily mean that I stop working too. I mean, I'm still getting some stuff done. One of the things I told the team is that if I get an email from them that's after 9 o'clock, then I get upset because I don't want them working. I don't want them logging back into their laptops and doing stuff at that point. But for me, I don't mind doing that because I like to spend the time between 4 and 8, with my family, doing whatever stuff that needs to be done. I'll take 5-10 minutes, because I know my phone was dinging constantly, and I'll take that 10 minutes at 9 o'clock to look at it, while I'm watching Monday Night Football, and take a look at what it is. Is there anything that really that I need to focus on? And if not, then I shut it down, and that's the end of it. But I don't want to be addicted to it and just constantly looking at it and seeing, because there's never anything that important. It really isn't. It never really is. And that's not going to be the end of the world. And I'm trying to have my kids learn that in the same manner. My wife's a different story. I won't tell her what to do, but we're working on that together. So.
How about you, Mike? Any personal boundaries to maintain your mental sanity?
Well, I think my new favorite saying is anything after noon on Friday can wait until Monday. And I found that everything can wait. Like going back to the human aspect of it, you talk about families and who your kids are sick or your dog just died or you just won the lottery or whatever it is, the good and the bad and the ugly, you talk about it. But there's always tomorrow. Very rarely do you get in those positions where there is a hard and fast deadline. And it's usually, you probably experience it more because of the financial regularities or regulations and rules that come out. There are things you have to do in certain time frames. But most of the stuff can wait, and it's self-imposed bullshit deadlines that people want to hit by because that's what they've had in their mind. So realizing that was a big change. The one tactical thing that I do is I have Slack and email and all these things on my phone, but a couple years ago I muted all notifications. I still check my phone every once in a while, but from 5 to 9, phones, I actually have a wooden box in the dining room that I put my phone in that has padding so I can't hear it vibrate. I know it's there. If I have 5 minutes, I'll go check if somebody's doing something, but not having those constant alerts because sometimes your mobile notification gets there 30 seconds before your computer does, so you sit there and wait for 30 seconds because you hear a buzz and you wait and see what happens. but also it's a distraction.
Yeah.
And you know it's there, it's always going to be there, and being able to compartmentalize and not take action and discipline not looking at it has been the biggest change for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like that idea of the wooden box.